Hello, Robs. We're back with Cruel as the Grave by Eden Southworth. Flight and Pursuit, Chapter 30. Oh, death were welcome. Coleridge. On reaching Norfolk, lion burners drove at once at an obscure tavern, down by the wharves, and near the market. Here he found good stabling for his horses and wagon, and decent accommodation for himself and wife. Come to market, I reckon, farmer, suggested the landlord, taking the stamp of an old pipe from his mouth for the purpose. Yes, answered Lion Burners, as Farmer Howe, taking off his broad-brimmed hat, handing it to Sybil, and then sinking slowly and heavily into a chair, like a very weary old man. Your daughter, I reckon, farmer, continued the landlord, pointing to Sybil with the stem of his pipe. My only girl, answered Lion Burners evasively. And no boys? Inquired the landlord. No boys, replied Lion. That's a pity. On a farm, too, but you must try to get a good husband for the girl, and that will be all one as a boy of your own. Never had any children but this farmer, or did you have the misfortune to lose 'em? I never had but this one girl, answered Lion Burners, still evasively. Then you must be very fond of that girl, I reckon. She is all the world to me, said Lion, truly. Then he ought to be all the world to you, honey. And so I am, said Lion, answering for Sybil, whom he could not yet trust to act a part, though he saw, the instant he glanced at her, that he might have done so. For Sybil, as soon as she saw attention drawn to herself, began to turn her head down upon one shoulder, and simper shyly like an awkward rustic. You must excuse me for asking so many questions, farmer, but when I see a father and daughter together like you and your girl, I think of myself, for I have an only daughter of my own. All the rest of my children, and I had a whole passel of boys and girls, are with their dear mother in heaven. So you see, farmer, I am a widower, with one gal like yourself, for I reckon, from what you said, you are a widower. My girl's mother has been dead many years, answered Lion, with a drawl and a sigh. Pappy, I'm so hungry and so sleepy, I don't know what to do, said Sybil in a low, fretful tone, frowning and pouting. Yes, honey, I reckon you are, sure enough. So, landlord, if you have a couple of little rooms joining on to each other, I wish you'd let us have 'em. And we'd like a bit of supper besides, said Lion Burners with a sigh and a grunt. To be sure, I'll go and call my girl directly, and she'll walk up to your rooms while I have the supper got ready. Where would you like to have it, down here or in your room? In your room, Pappy. I hate a place like this, a smelling of liquor and onions and things, and men coming in and out, said Sybil, digging her elbow into her pappy's ribs and turning up her nose at the little tavern sitting room. Well then, honey, we'll have it up here. There. Up there, landlord, if it won't be putting of you to too much trouble. Oh, not at all, farmer. It's all one to me. Now I'll go and call Rachel. And the inquisitive and communicative host went out and soon returned with a young woman of about Sybil's own age. This is my daughter, my Rachel, as I was telling you about, farmer. Rachel, honey, you just go long of the farmer and his daughter and show them where they've got to sleep. That's a good girl. Put 'em in the two little rooms over the bar, you know. Yes, father. Come, sir, come, miss, said the landlord's daughter, leading the way from the smoky parlor. Lion and Sybil followed her, Lion walking slowly like a weary old man, and pausing at the head of the stairs as if to recover his wind. Pappy, you look tired to death, said Sybil in a rough, sympathetic voice. Ay, it is weary work for an old man to get upstairs, grunted Lion. The stairs are very steep, but here you are, said the landlord's daughter, opening the door leading into two little communicating rooms. She entered, followed by Sybil and Lion. She set the candle down on the top of the old chest of drawers and turned around, and then the travelers noticed for the first time how beautiful the daughter of their host was. Rachel's face was of the purest type of beauty, combining the physical, intellectual, and spiritual. Her form was of medium height and perfect grace. Her head was finely shaped and covered with dark brown hair, parted in the middle, and carried over the temples and arranged in a knot behind. Her forehead broad and full. Her eyebrows were gently arched, her eyes dark, luminous gray, with drooping lids and long fringes, her nose small and straight, her lips full, small, and plump, and her chin was round and well set. There were some flaws in this otherwise perfect beauty and grace of form and face, for her complexion was very pale, her expression pensive, and her walk slightly limping. While Sybil was observing her with both admiration and pity, and wondering whether she did not suffer from some hereditary malady that had carried off her mother and all her sisters and brothers, Rachel spoke. I think you have everything here that you require, but if you should need anything else, please call, and I will come and attend to your wants. Thanks, answered Sybil sweetly, forgetting her assumed character, and beginning to speak in her natural voice, for it seems so difficult to act a part in the presence of this girl. But Lion set his coarse boot upon Sybil's foot and pressed it as a warning, and then answered for both, saying, Thank you, honey, but I don't reckon we'll want anything but our supper. And the old man said how he'd send them that up here himself. Then I will leave you. Good night. I hope you will have a good sleep, answered Rachel, bending her head. What a fine face that girl had, said Lion Berners as she withdrew. Yes, and what a sweet voice, answered Sybil. But she is very pale, and she limps as she walks. Did you notice? Yes. I suppose she has ill health, probably the same malady that carried off her mother and all her sisters and brothers. Very likely. Consumption? Asked Sybil. Scrofula, sententiously replied Lion. Oh, what a pity, said Sybil when their conversation was cut short by the entrance of the landlord, bringing a waiter with the plain supper service and a folded tablecloth, and followed by a young man bearing another waiter piled up with materials for a supper more substantial than delicate. The little table was quickly set and the meal arranged, and then the landlord, after asking if anything more was wanted, and being told there was not, left the room, followed by his attendant. Lion and Sybil made a good supper, and then, as there were no bells in that primitive house of entertainment, he put his head out the door and called for someone to come and take away the service. When the waiter had cleared the table and the travelers were again left alone, Lion said to Sybil, I must leave you here, dear, while I go down to the waterside and inquire what ships are about to sail for Europe. You will not be afraid to stay here by yourself. Oh, no, indeed, this is not the haunted chapel, thank heaven, answered his wife. Nor Rachel, the damp girl, added Lion. No, poor child, but she may very soon become one, sighed Sybil. And Lion put on his broad-brimmed hat and went out. Sybil locked the door, took off her red coarse outer garment, and took from her traveling bag a soft woolen wrapper and a pair of slippers and put them on, and sat down before the fire to make herself comfortable. At first, the sense of relief and rest and warmth was enough to satisfy her, but after an hour's waiting and idleness, the time hung heavily on her hands, and she grew homesick and lonesome. She thought of the well-stocked library of Blackhall, of her bright drawing-room, her birds, her flowers, her piano, her easel, her embroidery frame, her ski terrier, her tortoiseshell cat and kittens, her fond and faithful servant, the many grand rooms in the old hall, the negroes' cabins, the ancient trees, the river, the cascade, the mountains, the thousand means of occupation, amusement, and interest within and around her patrimonial home, the 10,000 ties of association and affection that bound her to her old place. And she realized her exile as she had never done before. Her spirit grew very desolate, and her heart very heavy. But Sybil really was not a woman to give way to any weakness without an effort. She got up and tried to engage herself by examining the 2 little rooms that were to be her dwelling place for a day or a week. As chance might direct, there was not much to interest her. The furniture was poor and old, but neat and clean as anything under the care of pal Rachel was sure to be. Then Sybil looked about to try to find some stray pamphlet or book that she might read, but she found nothing but a treatise on tanning and an old almanac, until, happening to look behind the glass on the chest of drawers in the inner room, she discovered a small volume which she took to be the New Testament. She drew it from the hiding place and sat down to read it. But when she opened the book, she found it to be Celebrated Criminal Trials. The irony. At once, it seemed to have fearful interest for her, and this interest was terribly augmented when, on further examination, she discovered that a portion of the work was devoted to the fatal errors of circumstantial evidence. To this part of the book she turned at once, and her attention soon became absorbed in its subject. Here she read the cases of Jonathan Bradford, Henry Jennings, and many others tried for murder, convicted under an overwhelming weight of circumstantial evidence, executed, and long afterwards discovered to be entirely innocent of the crimes for which they had been put to death. Sybil read on hour after hour, and as this evening, while sitting in solitude and idleness and thinking of her home and its charms, she had first realized the bitterness of her exile, so now in reading these instances of the fatal effects of circumstantial evidence upon guiltless parties, she also first realized the horrors of her own position. She closed the book and fell upon her knees, and weeping, prayed for pardon of those fierce outbursts of hereditary passion that had so often tempted her to deeds of violence, and that now subjected her to the dread charge of crime. Yes, she prayed for forgiveness of this sin and deliverance from this sinfulness even before she ventured to pray for a safe issue out of all of her troubles. Relieved as everyone feels who approaches our Father in simplicity and faith, she arose from her knees and sat down again before the fire to wait for the return of her husband. He came at length, looking really tired now, but speaking cheerfully as he entered the room. "I have been gone from you a long time, dear Sybil, but I could not help it. I had to go to Portsmouth in search of our ship," he said, as he put his hat on the floor and sat down on the fire. "Then you found a ship?" she inquired, with so much more than usual anxiety in her expression that he looked up in painful surprise as he realized her question. "Yes, dear, I have found a ship that will suit us. It is the Enterprise, Captain Wright, bound for Liverpool within a few days." "Oh, I wish it were tomorrow," sighed Sybil. "Why, love? What is the matter?" tenderly inquired her husband, taking her hand and looking into her face. "That is the matter," replied Sybil with a shudder as she took the volume she had been reading from the chimney-piece and put it in his hands. It was a work with which Lyon Berners, as a law student, had been very familiar. "Why, where did you get this?" he inquired in a tone of annoyance, for he felt at once what its effect upon Sybil's mind must be. "Oh, I found it behind the looking-glass in the other room, left by some traveler, I suppose. I am sorry, Sybil, that you have chanced upon this work, but you must not let its subject influence you to despondency." "Oh, Lyon, how can I help it? I was so strong and cheerful in my sense of innocence. I had no idea how guiltless people could be convicted and executed as criminals. My darling Sybil, all these cases that you have read were tried in the last century, a period of judicial barbarism. Courts of justices are more enlightened and humane now in our times. They do not sacrifice sacred life upon slight grounds. Come, take courage, be cheerful, trust in God, and all will be well." "I do trust in the Lord, and I know all will be well, but oh, I wish it were tomorrow that ship is to sail," answered Sybil. "It will sail very soon, dear, and now we had better go to rest and try to get some sleep. In my character of market farmer, I have to be up very early in the morning to attend to my business, you know," said Lyon with a smile. Sybil acquiesced, and the fugitive couple retired for the night. Bodily fatigue so much overcame mental anxiety, they slept profoundly, and continued to sleep until near daylight, when they were both aroused by a loud knocking at the door. "Oh, for heaven's sake, who is that?" gasped Sybil, starting up in a fright, for every knock now scared her with the thought of sheriff's officers armed with a warrant for her arrest, and excited the whole train of prospective horrors. "Hush, darling, hush. It is only one of the men about the place waking me up according to orders to be in time for the market." "We must keep up our assumed characters, my dear Sybil," said Mr. Berners, as the knocking was repeated, accompanied by the calls of "Farmer, farmer, ay, I hear you. You needn't batter down the doors. I am a-going to get up, though it's very early, and I ain't as young as I used to be 20 years ago, neither," grumbled the farmer, As with many a grunt and sigh, as an old man and weary man, he got up and began to dress himself. Sybil, he whispered to his wife before leaving the room, I shall have to take my breakfast at a stall in the market house, and I shall not be back until the market is out, which will be about 12 o'clock. You can have your breakfast brought up here. And mind, my darling, don't forget to put on your wig and keep up your character. I shall be very careful, dear Lion, she answered. As he kissed and left her, Lion Burners went downstairs where he found the landlord, who was an early bird, waiting for him. Morning, farmer. What is it that you brought to market anyways, he said, greeting his guest. Mostly garden truck, answered Lion. No poultry, eggs, nor butter? No, because if you had, I might deal with you myself. Well, you see, landlord, them kind of produce is ill convenient to bring a long way in a wagon. And I came from a good ways down the country, explained Lion as he took his long leathern whip from the corner where he had left it and went out to look after his team. He found it all right and mounted the seat and drove to the market space and took a stand and began to offer his produce as zealously as any farmer on the ground, taking care in the meantime to wear his spectacles and broad-trimmed hat and to keep up his character, in voice and manner, and as the morning advanced, he began to drive a brisk business. Meanwhile, Sybil, left alone in her poor room at the little inn, arose and locked the door after Lion to prevent intrusion before she should effect her disguise, and when she had thus ensured her privacy, she began to dress. As soon as she had transformed herself, she opened the door and called for Rachel. The landlord's daughter entered, giving her guest good morning and kindly inquiring how she had slept. Slept like a top, but I'm not well this morning neither, so I'd just like to have my victuals sent up here, answered Sybil. Very well. What would you like? Fried fish and pork steaks and broiled chickens and grilled bacon. And let me see, have you any oysters? Yes, very fine ones. Well, then I'll take some stewed oysters, too, and some poached eggs and preserved quinces and fried potatoes and corn pone and hot rolls and buckwheat cakes and cold bread and butter and some coffee and buttermilk and sweet milk. And that's all, I believe, for you see, I ain't well, and I haven't come to my stomach yet. But if I can think of anything else, I will let you know. Is your father going to eat his breakfast with you? Who, Pappy? No, he's gone to market, and will get his victuals at the eating stall. Wouldn't it be good fun to keep a eating stall in a market? I don't think so. Well, never mind whether you do or not. Hurry up with my victuals. Yes, but I'm afraid we haven't got all the things you want. But I will bring you up what we have, said the girl, who had opened her eyes widely at the bill of fare ordered by her sickly guest. Well, go do it then, and don't stop to talk, said Sybil shortly. Rachel went out, and in due time returned with a waiter containing Sybil's breakfast. Why, there ain't half, no, not a quarter of the things I told you to fetch me, said Sybil, turning up her nose at the waiter. That Rachel placed upon the table. I have brought you some of everything that we have cooked. I should be glad if I could bring you all you wish, replied Rachel. And I suppose I must be half starved in this poor place, and me so weakly too. I'll tell Pappy as soon as ever he comes. I want to go home, I do. We've got as much as ever we can eat at home, grumbled Sybil, doing her best to act her part and perhaps overdoing it. But Rachel was not suspicious. She again apologized for not being able to fill her guest order in its utmost extent, and she remained in the room and waited on Sybil until the breakfast was finished. Then she took away the service, wondering how little her guest had eaten after having ordered such a vast amount of food. Again, Rachel came back to the room and made everything tidy in each chamber, and then finally left her guest alone. Sybil walked about and took up and put down every small object that lay about her humble apartments, and then looked out of each window upon the narrow, crowded, and noisy street below. And finally, she took the volume of celebrated criminal trials that had a terrible attraction for her in her present circumstances, and she sat down and read until her husband's return. Lion Burners drove his empty wagon into the stable yard at noon. He had sold out all of his produce and pretended to be in a great glee at his success. The landlord congratulated him, and some chance loungers in the barroom suggested that under such circumstances it would be the right thing for him to treat the company. Lion thought so too, and in his character of farmer he ordered pipes and glasses all around, and then he made his escape and went upstairs to see Sybil. Still moping over the depressing book. Put it away, Sybil, and get on your bonnet, and throw a thick veil over it and come out with me for a walk. We have to buy something for our voyage, said Lion cheerfully. And with that, I will pause since this chapter goes another 5 or 6 pages. Maybe I can finish it. Let's do it. Sybil, with a sigh given to her fears, did as he requested her to do, and the two went downstairs together. Going out for a walk, I reckon, farmer? Inquired the landlord, who stood at the barroom door with a pipe in his mouth. Aye, aye. You know these girls, when they find out that their pappies have made a little money, there is no peace till it is spent. My girl is taking me out shopping to buy gimcracks and things. I'll be glad when I get her home again, grumbled Lion. And with that, I am going to stop because I don't think I can finish within the 13 minutes. Goodbye. Goodbye.